Hi, everyone. Good morning. Last day of the session. My name is Bhavini Surana. I'm a physical therapist, and this is some work I did as a part of my dissertation for my EDD. So I'm just excited to present this here, and thank you, ISS, for inviting me. So a little bit about myself. I have been a pediatric physical therapist for last almost 10 to 12 years, and I love doing what I'm doing. I completed my physical therapy degree from India, and then I did my EDD in motor learning and control from Teachers College, Columbia University. I worked at the Center of Cerebral Palsy Research while I was there, and all of my work has been around improving gross motor function and postural function in children with cerebral palsy. Currently, I'm an assistant professor in the physical therapy program at the School of Health Sciences at Torrey University in beautiful Long Island. So let's dive in. We are at the seating symposium. So what is sitting, right? Why do we care so much about sitting? So it's a functional position that children specifically use for significant number of activities. They're sitting at school, they're sitting at home. We use sitting for communicating with the world, participating in activities, and almost everything when we're not standing or lying down. So what is postural control, which is the motor control required to sit independently? It is postural orientation, which is a vertical orientation of your body segments. And it is postural equilibrium, which is maintaining the balance between these segments. So what systems work to keep it vertical? So let's dive into how do we develop this system. Now, as we grow, around 0 to 3 months, you start seeing the baby lift its head up a little, but bob down, and they need support to sit up. And you see a C-shaped curve of the spine when they're in sitting. As they grow older, you see the control descending to the thoracic spine and then down to the lumbar spine. And you see that in sitting with support, which progresses to sitting without support when they're free to use their hands for exploring the environment, which is a very important motor milestone. And at that point, you see the control has descended from the head to the cervical, thoracic spine, and to the lumbar spine. So this was a study done by Rachwani et al. And what they did was they recruited infants from 2.5 months of age to 8 months of age, and they longitudinally looked at their postural control. And what you see on the y-axis are the different levels, and I'll go into the levels in a bit. But basically, they are in the descending order of control, starting from the head to the thoracic spine, lumbar spine, and the pelvis. And what they did, and then what you see on the y-axis is their age. So the dotted line is up 6 months, which is when they achieve independent sitting. And then everything else is before that is minus. So the first point on x-axis would be 2.5 months. So what you see is this cascading control, right? You see a descending cephalocaudal direction of development, right? So we don't see an immediate independent sitting. It is not that the child just learns to sit one day. There is a gradual control that descends from the head to the pelvis. And the same thing applies to reaching as well, reaching meaning unimanual or bimanual reaching for different objects. And when they provided children support at the thoracic, so these were children 3 months prior to sitting. So these are children who cannot sit independently. And so when the graph that you see here is the excursion of the center of mass. And what you see is when they were supported at the thoracic level, meaning they had some kind of head control, you don't see any difference when they were supported at the thoracic or the lumbar level, both at the same time. Why? Because they're able to control their head. But when they were supported only at the lumbar level, you see that the excursion of the center of mass changes, meaning the level of support matters. It really matters where we provide external support, whether it's manual or mechanical, to children who are learning how to sit independently. And so this brings me to cerebral palsy, which is the population I'm really passionate working about and working with. And we all know that it is a group of disorders to the development of movement. So cerebral palsy affects movement primarily, and it is a non-progressive disorder. However, as the child grows, the insult to the brain can affect how they develop. So they undergo an abnormal development. Then as we see more severe cases of cerebral palsy, so GMF CS4 and 5, you see more pronounced postural deficits that then require some kind of external stabilization. It is usually manual when we do work with them in our clinics, where we decide to support them at different levels. And it is mechanical a lot of times when we put them in different equipment, which is wheelchairs, equipment, chairs, and then other equipment that we saw during the seating symposium. So in any case, we tend to constrain the spine completely. We don't really think about where could we kind of grade the amount of support that we give them. So a similar study to what I showed you for segmental control in typically developing infants was done for children with cerebral palsy, where there were, so this child that you see here is a kid with GMFCs4, so Santamaria et al., they did the study, and they provided children with CP support at different levels. And then again, what you see in the graph there is the excursion of the center of mass, and what you see is that in a child who cannot sit independently, as you go lower, as you lower the level of support, you see a decrease in the, or I would say more disorganized path of the center of mass, which tells you that they have lesser control. So the same principle of segmental control applies to children with cerebral palsy as well. So most interventions that we as physical therapists were, used to improve postural control in children with cerebral palsy, we use the all or none principle, meaning that the child can either sit independently or cannot sit independently. We don't really think about what if we provided support at specific levels and see if they had some kind of gradient in the control, which would then allow us to localize our support and give them more opportunities to practice motor skills and kind of, advance on the path to independent sitting. And then the segmental assessment of control. So these are the levels that were used in the previous studies. And this measure has been developed specifically for children with cerebral palsy, where the trunk is divided into anatomic and functional segments. And support can be manually applied to each segment specifically, and then control can be assessed in static, active, and reactive domains. And the whole principle of segmental control made a lot of sense to me because, if you're supporting someone at a higher level, meaning if you're supporting someone at an axillary level, that means the child only needs to control everything that's about that. Because you're stabilizing the pelvis when they're in sitting, and then you're giving them external support at the axillary level. So they have a lesser number of segments, lesser degrees of freedom to control, and a smaller length of the spinal column to control. However, as you go lower, when you support someone at the mid-lumbar or pelvic region, they have a higher length of segmental column to control and more segments. So you can kind of play with these segments to see how we can work to kind of make skills easier, harder, and let them practice with what they have rather than constraining that completely by giving them support everywhere, which we normally tend to do in most seating equipment that we use. So I developed something called the Segmental Intensive Trunk Training, which uses the motor learning framework. So the dynamical systems theory, it tells us that any motor skill, it is an interaction between the individual, task, and the environment. So at an individual level, I was looking for active engagement, motivation, and fun activities for the child. Children are in therapy since they were born, when they have cerebral palsy a lot of times, and they don't want another new therapy. It's not fun for them. It's not a new t-shirt that they want to put on. So these activities have to be fun. It has to be, for them, it's just a play session. For us, we're doing something very structural. At the level of the task, I used functional, unimanual, and bimanual tasks. Since you're sitting and you're constraining their trunk, you cannot expect them to move. So we will work on the segments that are free to move. And then for the environment, I provided static external segmental support. And that is what I'm going to talk about today. So just a real quick, this was the motor learning framework I used. So motor learning framework asks you to look at parameters like feedback, attention, the intensity, practice, and skill progression. Systematically define these parameters, saying how will you design your treatment, and then how will the dosage be measured, things like that. So for my treatment, I designed it to be 24 hours spread over 12 weeks. So 2-hour sessions 3 times a week for 4 weeks, which if you think is more than what they usually get at therapy. So I thought this was intensive. And then even when I looked at literature, for at least for GMFCs 4 and 5, this is pretty intensive. So that was the goal, is to do a lot of repetitions when they were being given the external support. So then what were my seating system requirements? I wanted something that could provide sustained segmental support to specific trunk segments, and then provides at least 2 points of stabilization. So the pelvis, which would be strapped as SATCO guides us, and then the segment that the child had control over. Safety and stability, children who cannot independently depend on the external support. So if we are not giving them stable support, it keeps moving, it's not safe, it's not going to help them. Durability, something that can withstand those 24 hours of treatment and all the different movements that I plan my children to do. Comfortable for short and long sessions. The children shouldn't feel that they're restrained. They just should feel that they're supported, and then they can forget about the support and focus on the activities that I want them to do. And user-friendly, meaning if I am designing an hour session, I'm spending 20 minutes fixing the device and having my child go in and out, it's not feasible. So I needed something that was good enough and fast. So these were the options on market, which I could have bought, and it wasn't very feasible because you have the K bench, which is available in the US. And this blue bench is really very familiar in a lot of clinical settings. We use it in schools, in outpatient clinics, even a lot of children have this at home. It's adjustable in height, so and can tilt, so it's very easy to use for multi-purposes. And it has this little postural attachment that comes with it, but can be only used for younger children. And then they have a bigger version, but again, that wasn't big enough. The other is the Lecky squiggle stander. And again, this is made in the UK, and in the US, if you want to buy it, you have to import it, and it's really expensive. So I wanted something that I could take it, put it in the school and say, hey, you can use this from tomorrow. Something that's mechanical, that's easy to use and easy on the pocket as well. So we decided to build something on our own. So this is the first version. So what you see on the right is the prototype, where we decided to use the 80-20 aluminum system. And it's a really robust system where you can slide things around, and they're very easy to use. Don't even need a screwdriver, just an Allen key, and you can take things apart or fix things. It's very easy to use. And there's aluminum, so it's sturdy. And the fact that we had a broader base allowed us to make it stable. The only problem was we put casters on it, and then we put that because we wanted, our lab had multiple rooms and was going renovation. So I had to move device from one room to another, but it ended up not helping us. So we had to remove the caster at the end. But this is what we envisioned. And then the little C-shaped enclosure you see was supposed to slide up and down. So you could adjust it to the segment you wanted to support. And then the bench would come in front of that. So what you see on the left is the actual setup. Again, since you want children to be at your height, because you don't want to break your back when you are training them, I had the bench mounted on a huge table, and then the device goes behind it. So this is one of the children I tried this design with. So again, the parameters I tested were safety and stability of the bench, of the device, and then the segmental enclosure. The alignment, because again, you want the spine in vertical and neutral. You don't want things to move a lot when you are training them, just because that movement is essentially what you're stopping. You want the support to be segmental and stable at all times. Comfort, and then the sliding mechanism was very important for me, because I think that was the main thing which was supposed to give them give me the ability to kind of go at the segment I wanted, and for different children, different body types. So if I had little increments of say 2 or 3 inches, it wouldn't help, because some children would fall right in the middle. So something that slided seamlessly was what I wanted. So for the first version, I tested it on 3 children, GMFCS 4 and 5. And then we did not really get good results. For the stability, like I said, because we had the caster with an extensor force that children tend to exert when they are moving, because they don't have any other direction to move since their pelvis is stabilized. So any positive reaction they get from the lower extremities tended to create this backward force on the device, and it kept tipping because we had the casters. So we had to get rid of them. And that is why you see a lot of excess in the device. With the bench too, for my adolescent children who were heavy in their body weight, the bench tilted with them because I was stabilizing the pelvis. So we had to find a mechanism to bolt the bench as well. And this was important because it allowed us to kind of see in practice how real life forces that children generate can affect the equipment we're using. Because it's very easy, hypothetically, for me to draw saying, okay, this is what I wanted, but it didn't really translate in practice. And then with the segmental enclosure, we used wooden pieces in the beginning because, again, they were easier to cut and mold and put foam on, but they didn't really hold very well. Because again, when you're supporting them at certain segments and they cannot sit independently, they're literally hanging on to it. And so it's a lot of weight to support and forces in different directions, even when they're putting their hands up or reaching for different things. Yeah. And then for alignment and comfort, again, since it was moving so much, it was not comfortable to the children. It was comfortable, but the alignment kept going on and off, and at some point it stopped being comfortable. And then the sliding mechanism worked, but again, for the older children, the younger ones were fine, but older children didn't really work that well. So we removed so for the first thing, we removed the casters and we bolted the device on a wooden platform. And we changed the wooden enclosure to, again, the same 80-20 aluminum parts, which then made it really stable. And if you see the last picture on the left, we put ratchet straps on the bench. And again, this was it was a very unsophisticated, homemade, lab-made kind of solution. But again, it allowed us to at least kind of go ahead and start the training. So this allowed us to make everything stable. But there was a Rifton strap that we used in the front because we did not want the enclosure to be very suffocating to the child. We wanted them to have some space, but that was not keeping the force static. It still allowed them to move so much that they were not able to recover from that movement. So if they're going too forward, the Rifton allowed that movement and they couldn't recover, meaning I needed something that was closer to the body and that was more static. And so you see the little X's in the enclosure part. So at the end, we put another piece of 80-20 in the middle, in the front, and then the enclosure was complete. Again, this kind of limited us because it was customized for this participant. And then if we were to do it with different participants, we'd need different enclosures. But at the end, we were able to create a system that was able to give segmental support, static support that can be sustained over a long period of time. So I ended up completing my 24 hours of training with this participant. She is an 11-year-old participant with CP/GM FCS5, so was not able to sit independently at all. Her intrinsic level of control was at the mid-thoracic spine. So we supported her at that level and a level below, and then we had her do some of the activities that you can see here. She completed 24 hours of training, without complaining of any adverse events, without complaining of any discomfort. And we needed some adjustments while we trained her, but mostly that was at the pelvic strapping. So again, for younger children, we have the commercially available equipment that we can make small changes to, but this was more for adolescents and then even for adults. So current setup can be used for older children and it can be used for adults. For the younger ones, we can, if we still want to use the same equipment, I would use enclosures of different sizes so that I can just take one off and mount the other one and we don't disturb the rest of the setup. And right now, I'm working on translating the segmental seating system solution. So this was lab-based, and then how do I transfer it to a home or a school-based setting? So that's the work I'm working on right now. References. Thank you.